Welcome. As we all know, every card game is characterized by its deck. In Rier, we call it troops. When it comes to building your troops, you need to know three fundamental things: the number you can have by name, their effects, and the duration of turns or rounds. Let's start with the number of troops. It is defined by the number of coins it has. That is, if a troop is worth 4 coins, you can have 1 or 2 troops with that same name. This graphic shows the idea better. The fewer coins the troops have, the more you can have of the same name. The coins will also define the cost of the troops. As for the effects, all troops have their specific use, which is found here, and it is important to note that there are active and passive effects, which can be seen in the upper left corner of the troops. The difference between both effects is that one occurs instantly after activating the troop, and the other when its condition is met. As for turns and rounds, this determines how long troops will be in their respective fields. Lastly, we have the troop type, which defines its strategic position on the battlefield. Once we have knowledge of our troops, it's time to define which character we will use to represent the troops and race you chose. Each race has 3 characters for now, and they are characterized by making a difference on the battlefield. Let's start with the virtues. Each character comes with 5 virtues that define them, and these can make a difference in the game when the player needs it most. On the other hand, we have a character's passives, whose function is divided into 3 parts. Born passive. This passive defines the character. It is their greatest attribute when playing and one of their conditions to gain advantage. Then we have the prediction passive. This defines the player and the character as such, since the predictions you make will impact on your character's abilities, giving you advantages based on your knowledge of the game. Lastly, we have the insight passive. Since the character also has his troops, this passive is intended to create synergy with both the character and the use of his troops when cancelling enemy troop activations. Character passives were created to cover the whole essence of a battle, giving the character personality, synergy with his troops and, as important as everything, the player's decisions. Oh, one small detail I forgot to mention. When the player successfully uses all 5 virtues during the match, their last breath can be used. Now that we have an idea of how troops and characters work, it's time to play. Before continuing, I must say that I'll explain the most basic notions of the game so as not to make this video longer than necessary and overload the players with information. When the game starts, you'll know which character you'll be playing against. Therefore, you can select a deck accordingly. You'll have 4 different options that you must have created before playing. Players will have 30 seconds to decide which deck they'll use, and when both are ready, a timeout will occur. By the way, if you're wondering what the options below are for, they are for spying on your opponent. Yes, if you pay 30 coins, you'll be able to see your opponent's stats such as how many times they predict or premonition regularly, how many types of cards their deck has, and even the spy merchant option will be activated for the entire game. You'll be able to see how many cards and coins your opponent has at all times. Oh, yes. By the way, you can also see what he's specialized in when it came to his high-ranking training. However, if the player chooses to protect themselves, paying 50 coins, you won't be able to learn anything about them, and your merchant spy option will be unusable for the rest of the game. So, choose carefully. Okay, let's get on with the tutorial, shall we? Now, you must select 4 cards from your deck that you think you need against the opponent you're facing or the strategy you have in mind at the time. You'll have 30 seconds to select your hand and proceed to the timeout. In this space, we're already in the pre-turn. So to speak, the first thing that will happen is a count of the number of coins each player has. The player with the highest coin value will decide which player attacks or defends at the beginning of each turn for the remainder of the first round. Attacking or defending is part of how you want to proceed with your strategy. If both players have the same coin value, it will be decided randomly who attacks or defends. At higher ranks, there are other ways to decide this. Finally, before the battle begins, you can declare predictions. You'll have 4 predictions available throughout the first round, and you can only have 2 declared at a time during the timeout. The advantage of declaring predictions during the timeout is that, if they come true, you'll gain 2 points in your prediction passive. This is unlike declaring them while playing, which will only give you 1 point. This chart gives you a better understanding of how predictions work. Players will have 30 seconds to make their predictions, and it's optional. Now, let's hit the battlefield. As decided in the timeout, our opponent attacks and we defend. Turns are divided into attack phases, meaning that when both players have attacked, the turn is over. Each player will have 45 seconds to decide what to do during their attack phase. Each time the opponent plays a troop, 2 seconds are added to their turn time. A play is added, and the coin value of that card is added in points. For a troop's effect to work, it must be activated. Activation normally lasts 5 seconds. During this time, the opponent's turn time will be paused, and you will have that same amount of time to decide whether to cancel the activation with one of your stuns or allow it to activate. As you can see, in this game example, something called premonition was used. The simple idea of this tool is to nullify an enemy prediction. You only have 2 premonitions available per turn. If you guess correctly, you'll break one of your opponent's 4 predictions, leaving you with 1 premonition available this turn. If your premonition doesn't guess correctly, you'll lose 20 coins and one of your premonition spaces will be broken until the end of the first round. So, choose carefully. During the activation of your opponent's troop, you know or have suspicions that your opponent has a cancel troop prediction. That is, if you cancel their troop with one of your stuns, you'll not only lose one of your stuns, but their troop will activate, and you'll be in serious trouble. But, by premonizing during the activation, you're assuming your opponent has a cancelled troop as an active prediction. As you can see in the video, by correctly premonizing, the prediction is broken, and when you realize this, either by sound or sight, you cancel the troop's activation with the stun and get away with it. When the opponent makes their 3rd play, the counterattack will be triggered. This doesn't mean the opponent's attack turn is over. This measure serves to allow the defending player to defend themselves in some way. During a counterattack, the player will have 20 seconds to make a play, including playing a troop, using a passive, or a virtue. In this example, it was decided to use a virtue. Upon using it, the counterattack ends, and the opponent continues their attack turn with their remaining turn time. This cycle will repeat until the opponent runs out of moves or their turn time runs out. An important detail: only 1 virtue can be used per turn, so use it wisely. If the opponent had a virtue use prediction, the virtue in the player counterattack wouldn't have worked and would have been nullified for the entire game. However, the player either knew the opponent didn't have this prediction active or decided to take a risk. When the opponent gives up their turn or their time runs out, the most important thing now is to have more points than our opponent in order to win the first turn. So we must use everything at hand to achieve this. Now, every time the player makes 3 moves, the opponent can opt for a counterattack, and the same cycle will repeat until our turn time expires or we decide to end the turn. Among the things we can do during the attack or defense turn are some tools of war and the merchant. The tools of war have different ways of being used, as you can see in this graphic, and the merchant is an assistant who helps us obtain benefits that interest us during certain turns. Since the opponent has already attacked, it means that if the player closes their attack turn, the turn will be over, and whoever has the most points wins. Since the opponent is aware of this and sees that after the player's turn, they will win, they decide to use one of the tools of war called surprise attack. Their plan was to interrupt our attack phase and make a play to try to apply pressure and win the turn. But, remember, the player predicted this during the timeout, so the opponent's surprise attack not only couldn't proceed, but they won't be able to use it again until the end of the first round. With this in mind, the player decides to close the turn, knowing they have more points, and therefore, the first turn goes to player 1. Remember how we mentioned passives earlier? Well, Dryaina's passive is that, if she wins the turn, she can select an area and destroy it, limiting the opponent's options in future turns. This concludes the basic Rier tutorial. Stay tuned for future videos and updates, as there's still much to discover and explain. If you want to learn more, become a Rier adept and be part of this new world. Thanks, and until next time.